Charlene and Alan were the picture-perfect couple as they walked along the sawdust-covered trails that meandered through the county fair. The aroma of popcorn, fried dough, onions with sausage, corn dogs, and cotton candy filled the air. Charlene was a trim and very pretty girl in her light blue dress with white lace. She flashed her hazel eyes and batted her long natural lashes at her boyfriend Alan, and with pouting lips looked at him, thinking about what she should say. She thought about it and decided that she would ask him to take her on the Ferris wheel so they can look over the fairgrounds, and when they reached the top, she would get her first kiss. Alan was a tall young man with intense light brown eyes and a muscular build, but not too bulky. He was just right for her. They stood next to each other in line at the Ferris wheel, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body on the cool summer night. She was staring up at the whirling circle of lights, listening to music from the carousel next door, when to Charlene's delight, they both stepped up and sat on the bench seat made only for two, while the attendant closed the bar over their knees. When they reached the top, the wheel stopped to allow a couple to exit at the bottom and load the next guests. Charlene was in awe as she gazed onto the cacophony of lights, music, and laughter. This was her first date with Alan, so she was not sure if she could make the first move. After all, she was a good girl, and boys wanted to feel like they were in control. So she resisted the urge and twirled at the ends of her long brown silky hair, hoping he would get the nerve. But Alan was a gentleman and would probably not kiss her until they stood at the door of her home under the porch light before her father opened the door to check on them. She noticed him sigh as he stared out toward the distant lights of town, as long columns of light from the fair spots cut large arches across the hazy dark sky. He tucked his hands into his pockets and leaned back against the rear of the seat, seeming to be content to just sit there. Charlene was a little disappointed that he didn't put his arm around her, but he was probably just shy and a little intimidated by her beauty and sparkling personality. They continued on down, exited the seat, and headed toward the circus tent. As they strolled along together, they passed by the bumper cars, roller coaster, and the swinging pirate ship. She wasn't a fan of rides that spun around, though the Ferris wheel had never bothered her, so she was glad that he didn't stop at one of those rides. They moved on past the barns that held the prized animals and art exhibits from local children. As they walked along, she drifted into thought and pictured that she would have two girls and a boy that would look just like Alan. Their children's art would hang in the most prominent spot of the art exhibit, with blue ribbons on all as they proudly stood in front of the first place paintings to have their picture taken for the local newspaper. She brought herself back to the present when Alan slowed, then stopped in front of some smaller tents that lined the way to the larger circus tent at the end of the trail. A wolfish man in a red coat with bright brass buttons and wearing a top hat had caught his attention. The man took a deep bow and took off his hat, revealing pointed ears and a face completely covered with hair. Step right up, and be amazed. You will be astounded. For the mere pittance of $5, you will gain the privilege of entering the sanctum of the strange, the mall of mystery, the halls of horror. Come in and experience the wonders that lie inside. As Alan watched the wolfman bark out his invitation, Charlene noticed the hanging advertisements that framed the tent opening. There were several on each side with portraits of each freak and large letters announcing the attributes of each. To the right was a painting of a trim young woman with long brown hair much like hers, only she had a misshapen head that gave the appearance of horns sprouting from her forehead. She had a protruding jaw that thrust out with jagged large flat teeth. Above the portrait was the words, "Goat Girl, straight from the Tibetan mountains, raised by goats." To the left of the opening was a picture of a man behind bars, with green skin and what looked like scales all over his body. He had a forked tongue and his torso ended in a long tapering tail. Above the picture were the words, "Snake Man, beware. His venom will kill you in seconds." While she was looking at the other colorful portraits, she saw that Alan had purchased tickets and was heading into the tent. She thought it odd that he did not give her a ticket, but the Wolfman motioned for her to walk in with him, so obviously he was being gallant and did not want her to have to mess with the tickets. What a gentleman he was. They were going to be very happy together. She just knew it. As they entered the tent, the first room was obscured by a dark green curtain. A small man, maybe 3 feet tall, waited as customers gathered in anticipation of what they would see behind the curtain. When all that had purchased a ticket in the last 5 minutes were set, the tiny man in the top hat and suit that matched the Wolfman pulled a golden cord to reveal a very large woman sitting on a stool that disappeared beneath her voluminous girth. Not only was she in excess of 500 pounds, she also had a moon-shaped pot-marked face full of hair which sprouted from large dark moles. The crowd gasped in unison and stared at the sight. No one said a word until Charlene couldn't stand it anymore and blurted out, "How could you do that to yourself? Don't you have any respect? You could lose some weight and for God's sake shave that hair off. And why would you wear a bathing suit? You are disgusting and gross." Charlene could not believe she said that, but it needed to be said. She thought that Alan might think her uncaring, but when she looked over at him, she saw that he was just laughing with the others, so no harm, no foul. After the laughter died down, they moved on to the next few rooms, where she made fun of each of the other freaks to the delight of the crowd. She was sure to get that good-night kiss, she thought, and looked lovingly at Alan, who was having a good time. At the rear of the tent was one more room with a red velvet curtain covering the opening. Charlene and Alan moved together, but were told by the little man that only one person could enter the room at a time. He told the crowd that this was the mystery of mysteries and must be experienced alone. Charlene, not wanting to be selfish, allowed Alan to go first so he could experience the mystery before her. They would talk about it after it was over. When Alan didn't reappear, she reasoned that this must be the exit to the tent, so they would arrive back where they came from. Looking around, she noticed that everyone was gone, even the little red-coated man, so she entered the room where she saw a large gilded picture frame against a black cloth backdrop. The 6-foot-tall, 4-foot-wide frame stood up straight, with no visible means of support. It was gold-leafed with ornate garish carvings all around, and a sign above that said, "See yourself for who you really are." What she saw beyond the golden portal was a young woman with a face that looked like a goat. She had a misshaped head with protuberances resembling horns and an extreme underbite, with jagged, flat teeth that thrust out in all directions. The goat girl's eyes were sad and questioning and stared intensely straight back at her, not turning away. Charlene was disgusted with this one even more than all the rest. The woman was detestable. She started to feel some pity for her, but noticed that the woman would not look away at all. Feeling very uncomfortable, Charlene raised her hand and pointed at the goat girl and said that she was ugly, hoping that she would turn her gaze. But instead of doing that, the goat girl accusingly raised her hand at the same time, pointing back at Charlene. This was too much. The hideous girl was mocking her, taunting her to turn her gaze first. But wait, she was wearing the same light blue dress as Charlene. How could that be? What trick of sorcery was involved, she thought. She could not take it anymore. Charlene screamed and ran out the exit door, back to the front of the tent, just to the left side. She saw Alan talking with the wolfman, pulled herself together, and walked calmly toward them, ready to complain about how the goat girl taunted her. She would get their money back from this sham. She expected Alan to be sympathetic to her complaint, but surprised when he told her that she was creepy, disgusting, and to stop following him around. Charlene was aghast and confused. How could he say that? They were going to have their first kiss, and now everything was ruined because of that goat girl. She was frozen in place as Alan walked away, her mind a whirling dervish like the spinning rides she detested. Nothing made sense, so she asked the top-hatted barker how he was able to dress the goat girl in the same exact dress she was wearing. The wolfman then grasped her by both hands, gave a sympathetic smile, and explained, "Don't you remember? The last curtain reveals a mirror that customers look upon so they can see themselves for who they really are and be grateful and happy with themselves when they leave." But Charlene still could not understand. "A mirror?" she asked. "What did you do to me? How did you change me into such a hideous creature?" The wolfman gave her a knowing smile and pointed at the large portrait to the right side of the tent entrance. She looked again at the portrait she saw before entering the tent, and suddenly she realized that the goat girl in the picture was wearing the same light blue dress with white lace as her. She began to cry, and snuggling under the wolfman's coat said, "I only wanted to be normal, but was cruel to my friends." The wolfman handed her a handkerchief and told her, "Don't be so hard on yourself. Happiness comes from within. You don't have to pretend you're someone else. Your friends will understand. Now go and tell them you're sorry, and try not to do this every time we go to a new town."